Dr. Joy Kong is a triple board certified physician who specializes in regenerative medicine these days. And she got on my radar a few years back when I was researching stem cells. And I just found all of her discussions to be extremely clear and concise and insightful. And I've been following her ever since. She also wrote a great book called The Tiger of Beijing, which truly exemplifies the American dream of growing up in communist China and finding her way to America. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Here's Dr. Joy Kong. The best medicine. All right, Dr. Joy Kong, thanks for joining us.
Yes, you're so welcome. Great to be here, Chris.
I appreciate you coming on. I obviously want to talk to you about stem cells, which is your sort of expertise and all that. But I have to say, I read your book recently, The Tiger of Beijing, and I have so many questions. It's like a real American dream story.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were born basically in the middle of the Cultural Revolution in China.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about that time and what was happening at that time and any sort of residual memories you have? Because you were born in 1971?
Yes. So the eye of Cultural Revolution, which was from 1966 to 76, where the whole country was basically in a shutdown mode, reserved only for struggles between classes. So that would be between the have-nots and the haves, right? The capitalists. And my last name is Kong. It's actually Confucius' last name. And Confucius was regarded as the backward anti-revolution force that prevented China from progressing in the world stage, because it's, fostering this old tradition of respecting your elders and the country, the emperor, and is not allowing more innovation and more aggressive outward thinking. Kept China in a more subdued state. But that's my last name. It's the same name as Confucius. So when I was a little kid, I was put on this little bomb shelter, this little platform, and they were running around and saying "Downfall Confucius, downfall Confucius." And so I would, they were running around, so I couldn't even get off the little platform, couldn't jump off. But that's kind of the atmosphere, right? It's very, very adamant about ideology, and communism is the way to go. There's no God. There's nothing beyond what we, can see. So that's the atmosphere, and it's very much conformist. So if you are a rebel like me, then, good luck. Principals' offices and write-ups, and I couldn't join all the organizations that everybody else was joining, like the Young Pioneer, the Young League, and then later on, the Communist Party. So I had the hardest time getting into any organizations because I was always doing things that's opposite to what you're supposed to do. Yeah, that's I never felt quite fit in. I was always doing my thing, and my friends were always amazed and how you're able to always do your own thing. Like, you just don't care. You just do whatever you want. I was like, yeah, exactly. So, I knew about the sense of individual freedom in the West, and that's what I just felt that's where I needed to be. So knowing about America, there's always this beautiful ring to America where it's the land of the free. So if I could be there, and then I could just be who I really was, who I am. Yeah, so the seed was planted very early on, probably when I was early teens, 12, 13. I knew that I had to be there. Hey, the first song I ever heard was Country Road, and I loved it. I thought that was so pretty. It was stand out a lot compared to all the revolutionary songs. But anyhow, so we digress. That's how I grew up.
From what I gather, it sounded like you were very stubborn and a handful for your parents growing up. What what are some of the things you remember as far as being restrictive? Because I have a bunch of friends that come from communist nations, some from Romania and whatnot. And I love hearing stories about certain things that they remember of maybe being very restrictive.
Well, I was bored to death when it comes to politics class. I mean, everybody had to repeat the same things and, hold the party line, whatever. I just thought that was really, really dumb. And I've always, kind of felt that way. Restrictive, I think I lucked out in that when I was growing up, really when I entered school, age 7, that's when China opened its door. 1978, that's when private enterprises actually were allowed. Before that, it's absolute no-no. And then Deng Xiaoping came on, and all of a sudden there were, private, you can be a peddler, you can sell things, as an individual. All of a sudden, those were things that were absolutely not, right, not allowed. You were supposed to have a community. Everything was owned by the government. The government comes out and do things. You don't come out as a person and sell things. So, but that started to be allowed, and that was very confusing for a little kid. On one hand, you were told the trend of human evolution was, slavery, and then, the agricultural society, feudalism, right? And then you go to capitalism. And then the next stage in evolution was socialism. So, you don't go backward, right? You don't go to socialism and then you all of a sudden say, oh, all the things that were happening in capitalism is okay now. So that was very confusing.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that caused the whole generation of just people not understanding that, they don't have an identity anymore. So that's how I felt, that everything I was told is, it's kind of like when you've been told that there's a God all your life. And then all of a sudden one day you're like, haha, there's actually no God. So that's how it felt like. That's, communism was the only way.
I was just fascinated because in your sort of march forward toward coming to America, which we're very strong-willed in doing, the bureaucracy and what you had to go through, I was just the fact that you had dossiers following you around and having to just so many hoops that you have to jump through in order to actually just get here. It's remarkable. I think people don't understand that.
Well, thank you for appreciating that. I think that's yeah, a big part of the journey. A lot of my friends were actually saying, "Why are you even trying?" Because it's next to impossible. And to me, and even at a young age, I heard if you have a determination toward a goal, the whole universe will conspire to help you. So I
Wow.
remember been rejected. Well, even before my visa was rejected, I was thinking, okay, I'm willing this. I'm really I'm pointing my will at this one direction, and I know the universe is just going to come and help me because I just want it. I didn't even know why I wanted it. I mean, there was this deep sense that I had to be in America. And I was trying to reason with myself of why, and then finally I just gave up. I think I hope the audience, really take that home, that if you really, really want something deep down in your heart, you want something, you just go for it.
I mean, they have to read the book to get the full picture because it was just like one setback after the other. It's just incredible the will that you displayed, and I was absolutely captivated by it. And your book is full of like these little you quote little wisdoms. Maybe it's because a descendant of Confucius, from what I understand. Maybe that's why you have wisdom in your veins. But do you feel like in China and in Eastern cultures, there's more of a sense of the wisdoms in the culture and maybe more respect for elders and sort of the lessons that are passed down than we have here in the Western cultures?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't understand why people would be embarrassed about their age, right? You should be proud. The Chinese are very proud of their age. It's like, how old are you? Oh, I'm 75. Like I made this far, I can teach you, right? I can teach you a
Yeah.
lot. So people need to be proud of their journey. You are still alive. You're still here. For God's sake, wake up and stop deprecating yourself just because you're older. You have so much to teach. So I think that's one thing that I hope the West wakes up, to your own, value, to your own worth. Yeah.
How old were you when you got here?
20.
You end up going to school. Long story short, you end up going to school and finally getting your doctorate.
So I went
Right.
to UCLA, you become an MD, but after you get your MD, you decide on your specialty. So that's when I went into psychiatry.
It seemed to be a big passion of yours as well in dealing with psychiatric patients. And
Perpetually, perplexed by our brain, right? How does our brain do all these things? I remember just the fact that we cry. Like, what's the biochemistry of crying? What is going on there? Why do we cry? And all these moods, all these thoughts, and how can we harness and how can we direct? And then, of course, psychiatry is when everything can go dramatically wrong, right? People can lose touch with reality. And so what's going on there? And I really just wanted to understand and make a difference, because I can't think of worse type of suffering than mental health suffering, because that robs you of the joy of existence,
Absolutely.
period.
And how did you transition from that into regenerative medicine and where you are now with stem cells and other things?
Yeah, I always recognize, I think even in medical school, I recognize the limitations of Western medicine
Mm,
because it's very linear in its approach. It thinks that every organ is doing its own thing, not realizing that they're all talking to each other, and they're completely interlinked by many, many, many threads. Could be linked by nutrients, by hormones, or possibly even by energy. But the Western medicine, which is a young discipline, it's a little bit of a has a little bit of arrogance and is not accepting that the body is as complex as it is. So I always knew that there was something missing. And doing psychiatry, I recognized that by separating your brain out of with from the rest of your body, you're missing, huge part of the picture and huge chance of healing the body. That's healing the brain. So I wanted to know more about how different organs connect to each other, how the body functioned as a whole. So in that process, of course, I've always wanted to be healthy, to take good care of my body, right? Respecting the gift that I've been given, this body. And in that process, I discovered functional medicine, which is a more integrative approach to medicine. And then very quickly, the anti-aging aspect, the anti-aging medicine, American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. So meeting doctors from there, they were doing things like stem cell therapy. And the
mm,
moment I heard about people actually doing stem cell therapy and just knowing what stem cells could possibly do, just having the scientific understanding a little bit, and then realizing that we are actually utilizing the treatment, and not only utilizing it, the results are phenomenal. That's when I did a really deep dive, because I just, for my own curiosity, my intellectual curiosity, I wanted to understand how these cells work and what kind of cells are they? What kind of cells are you giving people? What mesenchymal stem cells? Why mesenchymal? There's, that's one germ layer, right? We have three germ layers when the fetus is forming. So why are we focusing on this one germ layer? What about the other two? So I just, help me understand. I need to figure this out. So that's when I just started reading articles after articles, because there are no textbooks. So the way you learn is by reading scientific publications. So that's when I realized that there are different types of cells, and you can get it from your own body, or get it from umbilical cord, or you can get it from all kinds of stuff, dental pulp, menstrual blood. You can get it from a lot of things. You can get stem cells, but how do they work, and how do they stack against each other? How do you compare using your own cells versus somebody else's, like young birth tissue cells? So then I started, once I realized that I have information that really has not been shared, that most doctors don't know, or even in scientific conferences, the particular subject have not been covered. But because I went on a deep dive, because I had evidence and had research articles looking at the differences between different cell types and what they do. So I put together a lecture and started lecturing different conferences. Then that, I did more and more subjects, and then I started training other doctors. So that's kind of the evolution, while doing the treatments in my own clinic.
yeah, I remember you saying in your experience going through medical school that you were groomed to, well, doctors are groomed to identify diseases instead of prevent diseases, right? And so
Exactly. Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of doctors that I've sort of followed peripherally, like a guy by the name of Peter Attia comes to mind, but a lot of these great doctors are moving away from traditional medicine into preventative medicine because they're sick of just treating the illness and not getting ahead of it. It truly seems like this is the way of the future.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you bet. It's here without the acceptance and knowledge of the majority of the doctors, and it's sad, but but patients are looking for it. This is completely a grassroots movement.
Mm,
People are pushing for this movement because people are fed up with being given just pills after pills without really fundamentally improving how good they feel, really gaining vibrancy of life.
What's the response? Is there a lot of friction and pushback on this, or are people receiving this kind of understanding that this is the pathway forward?
I think there are people who are independent thinkers, and there are people who are followers. The followers include a lot of patients who are just following their doctors. They don't really want to think for themselves. So whatever the doctors say, then they say, okay, well, the doctors know best. But there are also other people who are searchers, who are saying, well, I think there's more to this and I need to understand. So those are the people that come to me. They've done their soul searching and they've realized the limitations of the traditional medical route, that their doctors don't know everything. So they're doing their own research and they're finding out people who are more forward thinking doctors who are, treading new paths like me. And so these are the people who have found me. So they are not difficult to talk to, because I don't need to convince them that anything. The reason they're here is because they're already convinced that the traditional medical route is not end all be all, and there's a lot more to the story. Yeah, so I don't know what the percentage of people who are still really stuck on the old route. Partially is because the medical system is pushing them that way. I've
Right.
seen people who may think doing stem cell therapy will be great, but because it's more expensive, or maybe because it's a little harder, the insurance is not covering. Even just other integrative treatments, most of them are out of pocket, cost. So then they would rather do something like they would rather opt for surgery, right? And the surgery may cost $30,000,
But it's
but it's
covered.
not out, right? It's not out of their pocket. So they would rather, have somebody hack into their body, and creating this permanent change that sometimes could be not very good, than spending the money to prevent and really allowing the tissue to repair and regenerate.
Can you explain a little bit of why a lot of people I know obviously go outside of the US to get treatment? What's primarily the reason that they're doing that?
There's a myth that has been perpetuating, which is stem cell therapy is not legal in the U.S. I think it's a myth that's happily, propagated by people who are overseas, right? So, how wonderful to make sure that people believe they can only get it overseas.
Right.
The truth is, if you are not changing the cells that you're extracting from a tissue, let's say birth tissue, umbilical cord, then you are really getting a tissue that's analogous to any kind of tissue transplant. They're not considered a drug. But if you start to, add different medications to it, different chemicals to it, and you start to grow them into huge numbers, the FDA says, okay, now you're creating a drug. Now you have to go through this investigation new drug study, IND study, which is costly, time consuming, which is why most of these companies decide that, okay, we're not going to deal with the FDA. We don't want to go through this route. So let's just set up a shop, in Panama, in Colombia, Mexico. Is the rules are so much more lax. But the thing is that the doctors that I trained, or what I'm doing in the clinic, we're really doing tissue transplants. We're not creating a drug. We are not altering the cells in any way, and we put them back in the body where the cells can perform very similar function. And because the cells are so young, there's less chance for them to form some kind of reaction, trigger some kind of rejection reaction in the body. Say so, starting from in my clinic. So in our clinic and the doctors I've trained, what we do is that we're using cells that have not been altered in a way that's going to make them be regarded as drugs by the FDA. So then, because we're providing tissue transplants, it's completely within the parameter of what doctors can do. That's, just like blood transfusions, liver transplant. You don't need to make sure the FDA approves the liver as a drug, right? That you don't need to do that. And blood is not a drug; it's a tissue transplant. So that's what we're operating under, and that's why we can legally do this, because we are physicians. We're providing tissue transplant.
What's the most common way that people actually get them? Is it through bone marrow or is it through embryonic?
Yeah, so the three most popular ways is through the bone marrow, which is the earliest one. Actually, the earliest stem cell transplant was bone marrow transplant. That was in the 60s. So that was, they just didn't know it was stem cell transplant. And then the second one on the block was fat-derived stem cells. So they realized, oh my God, the fat tissue actually is not from the fat, it's from the blood vessels that are supplying the fat. There are all these cells that you can harness, and then you can put them back in the body, and they can provide all these healing response. And then the last one was the birth tissue, when people realized, oh my God, so in placenta, umbilical cord, amniotic fluid, all this birth tissue was full of regenerative factors. So we can get cells from, the umbilical cord probably is the most popular. You can get from the umbilical cord blood or umbilical cord tissue or amniotic membrane. You can get it from those tissues. And then they have these, incredibly young stem cells.
And is
So
that, I would imagine that's far more effective because they're young, right? And if you're recycling just your own stem cells, is it less effective because those cells have aged with you?
absolutely. Yeah, they are, just like people's sperm and egg,
Mm,
are aging with age, right? These are the most precious commodity, right, in the
right,
human body, that's for the
right.
human species. And they age, right? They degrade over time. Same things as all the other stem cells in your body. So they degrade. So they start to carry all these, oxidative damages, DNA damages. Not only they're less potent, because I've shown, people are interesting. They can look at my lectures called ROMSC's Created Equal is on YouTube. So I go through really detailed studies comparing these tissue sources. So when you look at very young stem cells compared to bone marrow fat derived cells, which are usually the patient's age, right, which is older, the young cells will produce more anti-inflammatory factors. They have more immune modulating properties. Their telomeres are longer, so they have more generations left. They have more potential to differentiate into different types of cells, so they have broader range of capabilities. And they're also more active when it comes to fighting off cancer. So if you have cancer, which we know that we all have spontaneous, pathological changes in our cells, and a lot of them are precancers, and your body has the ability, your immune system have the ability to get rid of them. That's why, you're not just getting tumors all the time. But if your immune system is weakened, then those cancer can manifest. Your stem cells are supposed to help you fight them off. But unfortunately, as you get older, they have less and less capabilities of recognizing that these are cancerous cells. If you inject your own bone marrow or fat derived stem cells back into your body, a lot of times these, your existing, if you have existing precancerous changes, these cells can encourage everything to grow. That's why we're having some of the concerns that stem cells can cause exacerbation of cancer. They won't cause new cancer, but they can exacerbate existing cancer. But if you use birth tissue derived stem cells, the overwhelming evidence is that they're going to help you get rid of the cancer. So that's how different using your own versus using very young cells are. So I'm, I can't in good conscience, advocating people using their own, especially when their age is more and more advanced.
That makes sense. And this idea of differentiation, is that sort of what defines what's going to be effective or not within the treatment when cells can differentiate or they can't?
That that could be one factor. Yeah, that could be one factor. But I think a lot of
I've heard
people,
this word differentiation come up quite a bit, so I guess I'm a little bit murky on what it actually means.
it means that the cell are going to start to become a more specialized type of cell, right? So the differentiate, let's say you have your bones need healing. And so these stem cells can get into the area, where it needs healing and can become your bone cell. So if they can differentiate and become a particular cell for that tissue, then that tissue can regenerate and heal. But the problem is, people are overemphasizing the importance of differentiation. They think that stem cells, the main job these stem cells are performing is to become the specialized cells, which is not true. Because in the last 10, 15 years, if you read any clinical studies or any research articles, it's almost like a repeated mantra over and over and over. saying, oh, apparently the benefit of the cells is not because they are differentiating into the cells, because they can track, right? They can track and tag the cells to see if they have become the new cells. And they, most of the time, they did not differentiate, but healing occurred. So it's not from them. Yeah, it's not from these cells. These cells are the ones that were telling your local stem cells to differentiate. So it's not by themselves becoming your own, new tissue cells, organ cells. It's because it's telling your own organ, to wake up those existing stem cells and tell them to replenish the tissue and replace the damaged tissue. So that's a huge revelation that we're just, it's just repeated over and over and again. But unfortunately, there are still people who think that, oh, we need to put the cells right where we need the differentiation to happen, right? We need the replenishment to happen. We have to put it right there. You're missing the boat. That's not why we're repairing. You don't need to put it right there because it's a whole signaling effect that is going to tell your local cells. Yeah, so we've seen healing locally over and over and over
What would
again.
be the main reason? That I have a lot of friends who have trained and are athletes and have, their whole life they've been wrecking their bodies. And so they go in for these treatments and maybe they get their shoulder and, their knee done at the same time, and one will take and one won't take. What's usually the reasoning why one might work versus not work?
Oh, at the same time. So the same treatment in different locations.
Yeah.
It could be the particular structure that's damaged. I think some, people still need imaging to look at what was torn or what was damaged, because at some point the damage, or let's just say a torn ligament, it could be torn so far apart that it's hard for the cells to get all the tissues to come together. So, the degree of damage could have something to do with it.
Right.
I think you still need to respect physics. If your ligaments, especially if it's completely torn apart, no matter how many cells I give you, they're not just going to spontaneously find each other. So, yeah, some may be related to that.
I know people like Tony Robbins have been pushing stem cells quite a bit. Are people getting it right in the way that they're presenting stem cells? You hear a lot of people talk about it, but I guess, is the information being transferred correctly?
Right. There are a lot of, influencers, people who have a lot of, a lot of weight in what they say, like Tony Robbins, Dave Asprey, all these, they have, Joe Rogan, right? They've tried stem cell therapy and they're, fans of it. Tony Robbins' shoulder, got healed, and also his brain was functioning better. I mean, there are all kinds of benefit that he didn't even anticipate. And Dave Asprey was doing the full body rejuvenation, injecting stem cells everywhere from head to toe. So there are different ways of doing this.
I think Dave
Yes.
Asprey's like, he said his goal was to live to like 160.
Yeah, 60, 80, I think it's becoming I do think we're at a stage in human evolution, in science, that um, we're tapping into tools that we had no idea that are available. And part of it was if we can tap into quantum physics. So forget about the old Newtonian, that has gotten us as far as where we are. But to go to the next stage, you really have to tap into kind of the tapestry of the universe. And I think it's getting here. I think it is a possibility that in my lifetime, I could see that people live a very, very long time. So long that they may debate whether or not they want to live that long.
Right.
So you better take care of your mental health, because, have an ongoing, forever operating physical body without good mental, clarity and understanding of what your life purpose is, and be able to be happy. It's really that sounds like torture. So
Right. And why is it so expensive now? Is it just purely scarcity? And is this just going to be something in the future that only rich people are going to be able to get done?
no, in the future, everybody will have it. Um,
Mm.
it's going to be very accessible. It's going to be as cheap as antibiotics. Everybody, if you feel like you're getting sick, okay, take some stem cells. If you're getting an operation, take some stem cells. If you just want to feel really good, take some stem cells. It's going to come to that. How long is it going to take? Depending on how much resistance there's going to be. I think hopefully within the next 20, 30 years, I'm hoping, but the opposition's fears because we are fundamentally preventing people from not just getting sick, but also from aging, from the drastic
Mm.
decline in aging. And we're healing people. We're getting people really well.
Which seems to be the exact opposite of what the pharmaceutical companies want, right?
I've gotten so many people off medications, how can the pharmaceutical companies like me, right? I'm a really, public enemy for them
Yeah.
because I'm really hurting their bottom line. So the opposition is fierce. You can see the suppression from, we I used to be enamored by the FDA, and when I was in medical school, and I was so happy the FDA was protecting us. But then the more I understand, the more I know, the more people I talk to, documentary I watch, and really seeing the inner workings, then I realized that there's a lot of existing interests that are pulling the string of the entity that's supposed to govern and protect us. So if that's not fixed, then there's going to be suppression of the treatment. For example, I cannot put an ad out on Google, on Instagram, Facebook. I cannot say I do stem cell treatment, and I can't even post a case or not case a testimonial. If I post a testimonial in the patient's own words, then it's considered making a claim. So if that's not suppression, what is? Right? I risked my life to come to this country. I mean, I risked a lot. Like you said, very determined because this is a place where we can say things without repercussions, right? We can speak truth. We can speak what I believe is truth, right? I'm not hurting anybody. I'm sharing information. So many people are suffering. And if I have treated somebody that got amazing results, don't I want to share with the world because I'm giving hope to millions, literally millions? But no, the government says that means you're making a claim. So that has to change, right? So that there's suppression. If you have suppression, then the doctors who are doing it are taking on a risk. So the doctor will have to pay malpractice insurance, right? Will have to protect himself. And then that's going to drive up the cost, right? Why would he be doing something that doesn't even have the financial reward to justify the risk that he's taking for his career?
It almost seems like some of the same markers of exactly where you came from. I don't know exactly how to untangle that. That's a very deep knot.
Yeah.
But what would be your suggestion to people who are on some sort of medication and are looking to start to go down the holistic route? What are sort of some of the basic things that people can do to start to move away from some of these traditional medicines?
Definitely find a holistic practitioner. So
Mm.
find a doctor, either a naturopath or integrated medicine doctor, somebody who understands that we can do so much before you ever get sick, right? We can optimize your body. There's nutritional optimization, hormone optimization, looking at your toxicity, looking at your food sensitivity, different things, chemical, how your body's reacting to the environment. Because each person is built differently, and your genetic makeup. Are you prone to certain things like carbohydrate, metabolism issues? All
Mm.
these things are real. So if you can address a lot of these factors, then you can really prevent yourself from ever visiting a doctor, from ever being sick. We've all known cultures where people are living a long life, vibrant, never have to see a doctor, active. Don't you want to be living the way, these folks have lived?
So does
So
that start with just getting a full blood panel
yeah,
and
yeah,
just knowing exactly where you're at?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. These days there's so much information online. Just look up, how to live a more healthy, holistic life. Tony Robbins' book, Life Force, I think has done a lot of good to the field of this new form of medicine. It talks about all these different new modalities and how people can benefit from them. So maybe just pick up the book, really get self-educated.
What besides stem cells in in the field is getting you excited? Is there anything else in regenerative medicine that's really getting you excited?
I think the peptides are pretty cool. So I do use both the stem cells and the peptides. Stem cells I think of as a holistic, like this almost universal intelligence for the body. It's alive, right? It's got DNA. The DNA means intelligence. So within that intelligence, it's going to talk to your body. It's going to work on different systems all at once. So this holistic overall amping up of your system, giving you more energy, give you more intelligence, giving you more ability to fight off things and to rejuvenate. But you can also use more targeted tools because some people may have a specific problem, like, let's say autoimmune condition, or some people have more brain issues. So if you can target a particular organ, that gives me more tools. And that's what we're doing in the clinic, that we can target using peptides. Because, I have a podcast on peptide as well. I've interviewed a few people when it comes to peptides. Very exciting. Peptides are these short amino acid sequences. So when they're really long, then they become proteins. But when they're really short, they have, very specific. We have supposedly 300,000 different types of peptides, all existing all at once in our body, right? All performing different functions. So we're like a soup, of many things, but a soup of peptides. So they all are all doing their own thing. So we've only discovered about 7,000 of them. So imagine that we are only, peeking into a fraction of what the body is doing. But even just that fraction, I think most commonly used peptides probably about 100, and they have different, functions. Some promote growth hormone production, some help with your carbohydrate metabolism, some help with your sleep, some are pineal gland peptides, and help you with extending your telomere. So there's just a wide array of benefits. So if you can tap into just a little bit of the power that your body already exists. So these are natural substances that your body are producing every day to keep everything running perfectly. But as we get older, then there's less and less peptides secreted. So we're getting more and more deficient. So if you can address a particular area that you're deficient at, then it can make huge difference. So I do think that, if we already have all these peptides that are existing in our body, what do we need the drugs for, right? If just I remind people of all the cases of spontaneous healing, because we all know it happens. So what's going on there? It's because your body already have everything, have all the answers. So if you can just, tap into that a little bit, and you've got all the drugs in your body already. So I do believe if we are not suppressing peptides, which are suppressed as well, because it's getting harder and harder for people to get peptides, harder and harder for a doctor to get peptides. Various pharmacies that produce peptides were shut down. So it's real. Peptides that used to be able to be imported from overseas now are restricted. You can't import them anymore. So all these are
Why?
roadblocks.
What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, take a wild guess. If you're healing people, that's really not good for business. So I think if the suppression is not there, we can go really fast. Then maybe within 30 years, the peptides are going to replace 70% of the medications. That's what I believe, that we can get there if we just know what the language of the body is. So that's another one that's really exciting. But or just energy healing. I think um, we're beginning to use more and more, light therapy, different sound therapy. I think they are tapping into something that's at the physics level. I was talking about quantum physics. I think now we're tapping into waves. We're not tapping into little molecules. um, that's chemistry, that we can move on to the stage of physics. That's really where, like incredible breakthroughs can happen.
Is there anything that you kind of could suggest people add to their routine very simply? I know people like Andrew Huberman talk about light exposure and even listening to sort of binary beats, stuff like that. Is there something that people can add to their routine very simply to maybe improve their life?
Well, the most important thing is to eat healthy and don't eat junk, and and put the right nutrients in the body. And I'm a huge fan of fulvic and humic acid. I actually did a podcast on that. If people want to look up fulvic and humic acid, delivering into your cells all the trace minerals, all these micronutrients inside your cell, and then taking out toxins outside of your cell. So that's something that's really foundational piece. Even just doing that, it can make a tremendous difference, right? Because our food these days are so devoid of nutrients, just they're very depleted. So if you can add that on, I also love the essential amino acids, just to give your body the essential building blocks, to make those peptides, because they're made of amino acids. So you want to have enough of these amino acids to make the peptides, make all the proteins, the enzymes, and all your structures in the body. Just those two supplements, I think, are very foundational. Yeah, so I do have podcasts on both subjects because I just think they're so important, and I take them religiously, because I would prefer not to age if possible, right? If you
You are
can
not
keep.
aging. You're
Thank you.
doing the opposite. Seriously, that's one of the reasons I started following you, because I think I caught on to you about 2 years ago on a video, because you were just explaining things so it was very easy to understand what you were saying for an idiot like me. But I think the video you made was like 5 years ago, and you look absolutely younger today. So I'm like, okay, this person is doing something very right.
Oh,
So I'm
that's
gonna.
wonderful. I'm so glad.
Well, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on and explaining some of this stuff. I mean, there's some very exciting stuff happening, and maybe you could let us know where we can find you online, and where's your podcast at?
Yeah, the podcast, so YouTube video, it's one of the things that I really enjoy, putting out videos of my own and also doing podcasts, interviewing others. And then the podcast is you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the major channels. And people are really interested to know what I do. Just look, up, joykongmd.com or drjoykong.com. It's the same website. In there, it talks about all the things I'm into, including my book, Tiger of Beijing. It
Amazing.
talks about the academy I founded where I train doctors, the skin cream I created called Chara Omni, which is phenomenal. It's 100% natural with stem cells and peptides, and all
Wow.
these, herbal extracts. So I'm very proud of that cream. And then my clinic. So it's called Uplyft Longevity Center, Uplyft with a Y. So if people want to find, the clinic, just uplyftcenter.com. And but yeah, just go on my website, joykongmd.com, and then they can find all the things I got myself into.
And you're in Southern California, correct?
Yeah, Los Angeles. Yeah. And we do have people flying from all over the place, all over, different continents. Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the best and most wonderful people come to see me.
Well, thank you for doing what you do and being on the front lines of this. I think it's so important, and so many people are benefiting that I know. I can't wait to learn more about it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for this opportunity. It's a really fun chat.
Thank you, Dr. Kong. I appreciate it. We'll catch you next time.
Okay.